Hi, welcome to our show today. It Takes a Village. It is an initiative through the Village of Rhode Island Foster and Adopted Families. We are here to provide support and information for families. So today's topic is building relationships with birth parents. And foster families are DCYF's major resource for children placed outside of their homes. Sometimes children can be placed with adults that have a pre-existing relationship. Could be a family friend, could be a relative, a coach, a teacher. Those families are considered kinship. Our children can also be placed with foster care resource families that are licensed that don't have a pre-existing relationship. So the goal of foster care is to safely reunite children with their birth families whenever possible. That is the goal. So supporting birth families has the potential to minimize trauma in children's experience when they are removed from their homes. So today we're going to talk about how can we build relationships with birth parents as foster parents. My name is Rachel, I'm the host. I am a kinship adopted mother of 5. And today our guests are Kim Zandy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, I love this topic. It's really something I'm passionate about.
Oh, great. And we also have Maya Colantuono.
Yes,
Nice. Good
perfectly.
It's a mouthful.
I'm also thrilled to be here, and this to me is one of the most important topics in foster care.
Beautiful, I agree, 100%. And you both are foster and adopted mothers.
Yes.
As well as founding members of the Village.
Yes, and fun fact, Maya was actually my home study person. And we talked about building relationships with birth families from the jump. And because I was a general resource provider at first for my 2 adopted children, and now I'm a kinship provider to their siblings.
Oh, beautiful.
So it was big for both of us from the jump.
Full circle. Yeah. This is beautiful because this is what really this topic is about, right? Because once our kids reunite, we want to keep those connections, right?
Absolutely.
So you got us started, Kim, so let's go there. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, so
your connection to the children.
Right.
And then
I'm going to keep the original part pretty brief, with the exception of once I went to my first informational about foster care, it took me a good 5 years to finally do it. I was really afraid, not of foster care itself, not of birth parents. I was afraid I wasn't ready to give up my single life where I traveled all the time, even though I was older, so it was huge. So, but I decided took the training, Maya does my home study, and I was a general resource provider for 2 children, my son, Julian, and my daughter, Ariana. When they first came, there's also relationships not just with the birth family. There's relationships with, they were kinship children at first, so with that part of the family, the extended family that they knew all the time.
So you was a kinship.
I
family.
wasn't. They were with Kim. But the
Oh,
family had 5 children, 5 and under.
Wow.
And they did it for 7 months. I always tell Mom, I don't know how you do it. It's the kid's auntie. She called me before the kids were even placed. We knew they were coming to me. And she gave me, you know how they say kids don't come with instructions? My kids came with instructions. And it was beautiful.
About that.
So it was really great. And it took a while, but I'll let Mia go next. It took a while, but I eventually developed a relationship with their birth parents too. And we have an open adoption, which has hit some bumps recently, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, so how long have you had the children?
Since I adopted Julian and Ariana since 2015. In 2015, and then I've been a foster parent to their siblings since March of last year. We're coming up on the year anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
And I'm doing a big party.
I was just going to suggest a party, so that's awesome.
But we're still working on reunification.
Oh, absolutely. It's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Maya, tell us your story.
So, so my family started fostering in 2008, and we just gave up our foster license at the end of 2021. It was a very bittersweet moment. But over those 13 years, we fostered 13 children, and we adopted one of the 13 children, and then my oldest daughter and her husband adopted one of the children who was our foster
that's
child.
beautiful.
So we have in our family two adopted children, and I just always wanted to be a foster parent. No idea why, and just at that point in our lives, it
worked.
It came together and it worked. But I never thought, the whole time I wanted to be a foster parent, I thought about fostering kids, like children.
Right.
Children. I never thought about the fact that these children have families.
Yeah.
And sort of in the back of my head was like from books I'd read and things like they weren't going to be, they weren't wanted children, that we were going to provide them a safe haven. And then I got into it and I was like, oh my gosh, these kids they have families who love them more than anything in the whole world and are struggling and want to figure it out. And we need to be part of that.
Yeah.
We need
And
to be part of that.
I think you
piece, not
bring up
just
a
the
great
child.
point in that we often focus so much on the child's trauma,
Yeah.
Yes.
and we forget the family is experiencing trauma from having their
Absolutely,
children,
having their children
removed.
Yeah.
So,
and probably experience trauma
whatever the-
themselves.
Yes.
oh, absolutely. A lot of times it's generational. It's not something that just
absolutely.
occurred at this one instance.
Right.
It's something that's happened over generations. Yeah.
Because of confidentiality, we cannot tell foster children's or birth parents' stories. So what we hear about in the news all the time, social media, we hear about the really, really bad cases.
Right.
Where it's so abusive that it's inappropriate for the birth family, not wanted, abused. There are so many reasons children have to be removed from their birth families. And many times it can just be a matter of, okay, let's work on this. You need some parenting, maybe you weren't ready, or a relationship. You know, if mom or dad was being domestic violence, they can leave. And then there's mental illness. There's so many reasons.
Absolutely.
And they're not all these gigantic abuse cases where it's just
Right.
Such a small
so
percentage. I
It
think
really
it's a
is.
very
Yeah.
small percentage. It's most of the time it's people who are struggling with
Yes.
all of those things. With addiction, that's huge, and all things that can be people can
be
overcome
resolved.
them, and they can be resolved, and they don't ever stop loving their children.
Absolutely. So I think we touched on why it's so important to
Yeah.
keep those connections. Because, like we said at the start of the show, the goal of foster care is to reunite.
Yes.
It's not to keep children away from their birth families.
Yeah.
So we want to keep that in mind, that is the goal.
It's
so
one of the
it's so
toughest things for foster parents.
Yeah.
Because many people go into it thinking they don't deserve their children a lot of time, or if they even understand that it's not something in their control, like a mental illness or whatever, they think it's unfixable, and if they're not the parents you would be, super mom,
Yep, yep,
then it's
yep.
the kids shouldn't be there, and that's not the case.
Right. So let me ask you all, what is one skill, if each of you can give me one skill that a foster family needs to have in order to actively support birth families? A skill, whether it's even like an attitude. Like, what is something, as foster parents, what is one thing you can say if someone was going to say, I'm going to be a foster parent, and you would say, well, do this?
I think being willing to step out of your comfort zone,
Huge.
being holding on to that fear and stepping in anyway, and being the first person to reach out. A child is placed with you. Your first question should be, where are the parents? Where is the family? When can I meet them?
Right.
And it's the last thing anybody really wants to do.
Yeah.
But that is, it's huge.
And sometimes the birth families aren't ready to meet you.
Yep.
Because
Right.
shame, embarrassment,
Right.
worry,
All those things. Yeah.
judgment.
Yeah.
I often say that the biggest skill that I have is compassion without condescension.
Wow,
because
that's beautiful.
you have to have compassion. You have to be able to say, there, but for the grace of God, go I.
Yes.
And you can't condescend because, first of all, human beings don't deserve that. And second of all, that's not good for reunification.
No.
They're going to say, like, what's the point? I'm giving up. I stink.
Right.
You're just adding to it.
Those are two great skills. And in my experience, in my story is a kinship story. My children are biologically related to me. And I always looked at my responsibility almost like my kids were going on a trip, right? Life is a trip.
Yeah.
And they had a suitcase with them. And it was my responsibility to pack it with good experiences. And so I kept that in my mind. And part of that, those good experiences were reminding them of positive experiences they had with their birth mother.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And hopefully
Keeping that there.
Right,
and even
right.
pointing out to them,
Yes.
you look just like your
Yeah,
mother.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
And showing them pictures.
Pictures.
And, and telling them, it's okay to write a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, do that.
Let's FaceTime mommy and daddy during COVID.
Yep.
Right.
It was really tough,
Yep.
especially when we were all locked down. Let's FaceTime.
Yeah.
We call our birth parents mommy and daddy. We don't do the mama name, papa name.
Interesting.
They are always
Their
their
mother.
mommy
Right.
and
Yep.
daddy.
Yes.
And my kids, some people think, oh, they're going to be confused.
No.
Lots of kids have two mommies or two daddies. Or
Absolutely.
multiple. They
Some
know-
kids have two
know
mommies,
the
two
difference.
daddies that like step,
Right,
They're always going to be mommy and daddy.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a question because I am kinship. You said your situation
I'm
turned
now
to
kinship.
you're now
Yep.
kinship, and you was traditional adoption.
Traditional adoption, we were traditional adoption. The little guy who was with us, who then went with my daughter and her husband, went to them as kinship.
Oh, okay, because they had a
but sort of, but
pre-existing
kinship,
relationship.
Not biological kinship, but kinship.
So
because
do
he was
you
with us.
find it's more difficult for kinship families to build those relationships with birth parents? And I ask that because in my situation, my children's birth mother is my niece.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? We have a history together. We have a relationship
Yes.
that started before I had her children.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it was challenging at the beginning to set boundaries because she's like, hey, auntie, come on,
over.
I'm coming
Yeah.
over. And I'm like,
No,
wait,
you're not.
You can't do that. I love you. I want you to talk to the kids, but we have to go about it in a different way. So did you find some challenges in building, if you can name one challenge that really sticks out to you?
I actually didn't, and here's
that's
why.
great.
Because I'm not biologically kinship, and I did have a relationship with, it's my kids' half siblings, so I had a relationship with the parent who is now the new parent of the new siblings. That's really confusing. I think it got us closer, actually. And then we got a new person in our lives with the new mommy. So for me, it really wasn't a challenge. I think in a situation where you are there's a thing with blood relationship, daughter, granddaughter, that you're almost responsible, or maybe you're angry, like, what happened? Like, it's your family.
Right.
So you're just like, what? We raised you right, and so there's a, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Or an anger at the person. So
Yeah.
I do think it's more challenging in that kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And
Maya,
so I
what do you
haven't really
think?
personally experienced it, similar to Kim, our little guy that was just kind of between our family. But I've seen it go both ways with other families, right? I've
Yeah,
seen it be
me too.
just so much easier because you have that history and that relationship. And it's from the child's perspective. I think a lot of times, like, I'm with auntie and mom and dad are here and there's pictures of the whole family together in the album and so they've sort of have that sense of being with family. So I would think that in many cases it's easier that way. But then you got the whole boundary thing.
Yeah, and I think too, you brought up, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but you brought up like just those different nuances between kinship, relationships,
Yes.
right? And it was great that I could continue traditions and cultural
Exactly.
practices
Yes.
that lessened you know, the change for my children.
Absolutely.
But I can imagine when families are taking in children and then now you have an interracial
Yep.
family,
Yep.
and you said, get out your comfort zone. Well, that could be very scary to
How-
say, how do you eat, right?
How do
Like,
I do your hair?
Yes.
Right.
Oh.
That's a huge one,
Yeah.
right?
Huge.
Right?
How long is this show? I'm not kidding. I could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But you know,
Right?
those are
Yeah.
the things where it may seem intimidating to ask a birth parent.
Or you think you're gonna offend.
Well, you think you're going to offend, but you'll never know unless you
Right.
ask,
Yes.
right?
Right. And to be able to ask, to find opportunities to ask the birth parent for advice,
Yes.
for information.
Huge.
You
I
know,
love that.
it's because there's this like power thing where it seems like you as the foster parent have like power.
You're better
because
than
you have
them.
the child.
Yes, I think, yeah.
And to any time, any opportunity that I would have to say, can you tell me about this? What should I use in his hair? Like
Yeah.
what does he like to eat? Tell me a story. This, that, and the other thing. How did you get him to go to sleep? Like,
Right.
Ask
Yeah,
questions.
because
they're the expert. They're
right.
the expert.
And I think it comes back to this idea of roses. And I'm a teacher, and at the end of the day, we ask our student, "What are your roses today?" And they talk about what went well, right?
Love
and
it.
sometimes those are the petals, right, of
Yeah.
the rose.
Yeah.
Sometimes kids are super focused on the thorns, and they lose sight of the
Yes,
flower.
yes.
And it's okay
Right?
to talk about the thorn.
And it's okay to
Yes.
talk about
Yeah.
the thorns. I
But
think
where's
in
the flower, too?
Right,
Yes.
and I think with
Yeah.
the relationships
Yeah.
with birth families, we often focus on the thorns.
Absolutely.
And forget they have some roses to offer
Yes.
to this partnership, because it is now a partnership.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we have to be mindful to bring attention to the roses.
Yes.
And one last question. How can, because we all been involved with the department or
yeah.
what agency we fostered through and adopted through, what is one bit of advice if someone from the agencies are watching that we can say to them, I wish we could have done this, or moving forward, let's do this? What is one thing we can give advice
I
for
got
them
it.
to do?
Encourage those relationships.
Encourage,
Yes.
huge.
Some social workers are awesome at it. I have an amazing one right now. But there are some that still, maybe it's problematic. Maybe their relationship with birth parents has a
Right.
history. And this is no like bashing of them. They got a hard job. They've got history too. But to encourage it, and if people aren't ready to meet yet, journal.
Yes.
That's where you
Yes,
can ask
absolutely.
your questions.
Nice.
Absolutely.
That's where, and it's a safe way for both people. It's keyboard warrior on Facebook, but it's the rose.
Yes.
Where the keyboard warrior on Facebook is usually the thorn.
Yeah, you got that.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think a lot of time, a lot of the workers are just, especially in the beginning, they're a little reticent to make that connection. Like, let's see what happens. Don't need to rush into things. Because I was trained, the training that I went through, that the foster parent co-trainer in our like 10-week training series was like, meet the parents, journal, parents. And so I came into it, I was like, parents. And the worker of the first child who was placed with us was like, oh. And it led me to believe over time that there was maybe something really like not safe or good about the parents.
yeah.
And I persisted. And when I finally met Mom, I was like, oh, she walked and she was like, thank you so much for taking such good care of my daughter. And I was like, I had to hug her. Like, it was unbelievable. But that was almost 2 months into
Yes.
her little child living with us.
Yeah, and I know that the department, DCYF, is trying to initiate certain programs and supports to, encourage those relationships between birth parents. I just heard of an initiative that they're starting, and it's called Comfort Calls, where they want, as soon as a child is placed, kinship or traditional adoption, they want the foster family to reach out to the birth parent.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
so happy.
Oh, that's
Like,
unbelievable.
It's nothing about visitation. It's nothing like you'll get in trouble. There's nothing. But they want you to reach out and just say, hey, Kim, the children are with me. My name is, if I don't have a pre-existing relationship with you, I introduce myself and I let them know, very relaxed, like they're
so
just
happy.
eating dinner now.
Yep.
You know what I
Compassion
mean?
without condescension.
Right.
Right.
And you
Does this
make
make
that,
you want
It's
to cry?
unbelievable. It really does.
It makes me want to
really
cry.
does.
and you make that
It
initial
just-
connection. And I think in that, it will give birth parents a sense of, oh, I'm part of the team. I have not been kicked out of my child's life.
Yes.
Who, like going back to what you say, our foster parents, our birth parents love their children.
Yes.
It's
And their
not a
children
matter
love
of
them.
exactly. So
And
we don't want to sever those connections. We don't want to do that. So I love that idea of comfort.
Whose
calls.
idea was that?
Where, like,
Do you know? I think it was a team effort, which that's what we want. Team efforts, because we all come from different points of views, and it's great. I think it'll be so beneficial
kids to know
for the
that,
children.
like, you know,
and
kids-
they said even part of those comfort calls, that initial one, you can have the child just say hi.
Yes.
Let mom
To
know
hear
you're
their
okay.
voice,
Let
you're
dad
still
know you're
okay.
okay. Yeah, I think that's gonna do
Yes,
great
for
things
everybody.
for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yes.
And again, going back to the goal is reunification.
Yeah.
You just put something so positive in that child's suitcase
Yep.
and
Yep.
in that birth parent suitcase,
Right.
because their children were removed and they could be tasting very bitter flavors.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But for you to do that makes them probably, it's like a Sour Patch
Right,
Kid,
right,
right?
right.
It turns sweet.
them a little-
you know?
right.
Right?
Right,
So
right.
I think that's going to be huge.
Oh my goodness.
I think that's going to be huge.
I need
I
to
think
research what
Right.
team members came up with
That's
that,
so
and then I'm
good.
writing such
right.
a letter to the director.
And I
He
think
better get ready.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he'll welcome it. And you know, they have a parent advisory council
Yes.
that they initiated where that is birth parents that are helping to change policies within DCYF
Yeah.
because they have their experience to speak of.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think it's all great and I appreciate y'all's input and insight and personal
so
stories.
good.
I really love this conversation, and I would actually love to, we don't want to keep repeating, but as time goes on, maybe do another segment on this, focusing on the how-tos, or I would love
Yes.
to, even if my birth mother would do it, I'd love to bring her
Yes.
on too.
That
Yes.
would be great.
Yeah.
She
to
calls
have
me
the-
mom.
that would see.
Yeah.
That's beautiful,
Right.
and that would be great. I would love to speak. I'm interested in everyone's story.
Me too.
And I would love to hear her story and
that's-
other birth parents.
Yeah.
We're closing in on the end of the show. Good conversations.
Wow, it goes by
so
too
fast. Yeah.
So much to talk about.
I think two things we could take away from our conversation is open lines of communication.
Yeah.
And supporting birth families is really important for a variety of reasons, right? As
Right.
we discussed. Most importantly, it minimizes the trauma, not just for the child, but for the birth parent.
Yep.
Yes.
And it minimizes the trauma for the social
For
worker.
the social worker.
Because-
And the foster parent.
For everybody, right?
You know, it's hard when if you foster a child for a long time and they go home and you haven't built a relationship as a foster parent, you took care of this kid and now they're gone and,
now
you
they're
don't know what
gone.
happened and where they are.
The other children in your
And-
home. I
yes,
know
right.
you had kids. I have adopted children. If we didn't have a relationship,
Right.
they would have lost cousins. They would have lost. Their brother is in another home. They would have lost all that.
Right. So connections matter.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
And no
they're everything.
relationship, like we said with the Rose, doesn't have challenges. There's
Absolutely.
thorns too.
Yeah.
Right? So it's okay to speak about those things and to build trust amongst these relationships. So for more information on this topic and additional resources, check out the website for the Village, which is, you'll see it at the end of the show. I wanted to thank Kim and Maya for being here today. This was great.
Thank you for
So
being such a
great.
great
So
host.
great,
Well,
right?
Thank you so much.
I love your analogies.
great
I'm like,
conversation,
oh, there's
yeah.
3 things I'm taking home from this.
That's the point of the show. Anything you hear that sticks with you, that helps you to live a happier, healthier, more joyful life, take it. That is the point of the show. So we want to do our last segment called Word of Mouth. And to connect with the topic that we spoke about today, there is an actual guide, something you can print out. If you find yourself in a fostering situation and you find it difficult to connect to birth parents, this is an actual guide you can print out, and it gives you steps to build that relationship.
I had no
So-
idea this existed.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Yeah, so that guide will be, you'll see the website and the link for it at the end of the show. Please look it up. I had gathered this information from Dee Bonnick, who is a consultant, national consultant for a lot of different organizations, but she's been partnering with DCYF to bring some insight into this topic, building those relationships. So please look for that link at the end. It's very useful in how to start the relationship, how to keep it going,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and if something bumpy happens,
gonna happen.
how to
You have
work
to
through the
expect it.
bumps.
Yeah.
So it's really a good resource, and I'm almost certain it'll help you in your lives.
Tell your caseworker about it too. Many times they're so inundated with emails
Yes.
that they miss because they're busy.
Yeah.
That they miss stuff for their other foster parents.
Right,
It's,
right.
Tell them.
And that's huge. We are all part of the team for this child to acclimate to life, right? And then reunify with their families.
Yeah.
So we're part of the team, foster parents, the birth parents, the child, the caseworkers. So it's okay to send information around in a circle.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much. This has been great.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
was
It was
Take
good to
care.
see you
So
again.
good, I know.